All right, boom. All right, hey guys, welcome to another episode of Mediocre Dads. I'm your host Quan. I go by Q, of course, where being mediocre is a choice and we need to refuse to be mediocre. And on this episode, I have another guest. As you can probably tell, obviously on the screen there is a guest there, and you know as I continue, guys, to tell you with each episode, Mediocre Dads is growing, and we're reaching more people. We're talking to more people, and we're talking to dads, and we're growing an audience because this conversation where dads are able to talk and communicate with each other is essential. Whether it's just a quick conversation about the game, or it's a more in-depth conversation like we're going to get into today about real things that happened in our past that we're, as men especially, told to keep on the hush hush and not talk about. And so with that being said, I'm not going to hog the mic, I promise. I'm going to introduce you to my guest. His name is Keeper, and as you can tell on there, his name is an author and speaker of child sexual abuse. So as you can tell on the screen, we're going to get into a serious topic. There's going to be a serious topic that we're going to get into today. And I was talking to him beforehand, and we're going to do another episode about something else completely different because he's full of experience and knowledge, and that's what I want to bring to you guys. So,
someone called me grandpa earlier, so off screen, right?
I didn't.
He's full of experience. Okay.
Basically, he's old. I think you guys can.
Basically. There's no basically to it. Yeah.
Obviously,
I will own that. I will own that. I have earned every bit of this. So yeah.
But what I will say is, if he told you his age, you wouldn't be able to guess it. You would never guess what his age was. Because I had it totally wrong in my head how old you were. So, but I'm not gonna put your age out here on the internet. For
it's
close friends.
It's 65. Yeah. Okay. So yeah.
So, but you would never think he's 65. Yeah, we were having out before this. He's talking about basically how young I was. So, but without, like I said, without further ado, guys, I have Keeper. You heard him talk already. Keeper, kind of go ahead and explain who you are. Introduce yourself to the audience.
First of all, Q, it is an honor to be here, man. It really is. I have been looking forward to this conversation because I know we're just going to get into it. We're going to mash it up. We're going to chop it up, and it's going to be real. And I have been looking forward to this ever since it was booked. So thank you for having me on your amazing show. My name is Keeper. Yes, it's a nickname. Everyone's been calling me that since I was yay high. So yes, it's the nickname. So let's just get that out of the way. What we're here to talk about, Q, as you said, it's a very serious topic. I am the author of the book Helplessness, the emotional health challenges that brothers go through once we learn our sisters have been sexually abused by our parents. And what we go through, the burdens that we carry, the conversations or lack thereof that we are allowed to have with our sisters, because it's not something they want to have with us. And yet, once we find out, the trauma that we are hit with is so dramatic, it's so swift, it takes it to such a dark place. Unlike our sisters, there are no books, there are no magazines, there are no podcasts other than mine. There are no documentaries. There are no movies that talk about the struggles that brothers go through after we learn what our sisters have experienced. And in my case, what was told to me and my three brothers by our sisters after we learned. That is one side. The other side is 6 years prior to my sisters being sexually abused, me and my older brother, we were sexually abused by our babysitter almost daily for 6 months. So I say that to say I understand both sides of the equation. I understand the damage side, having experienced it myself, and I understand the collateral damage side of being a brother. And I think it's an important distinction, because when I talk about the book, particularly with women and sisters, there's often some immediate pushback that I don't understand, but I do, because I used to say a victim, but now I flip that and say I am a survivor of it. and I am a survivor, and I am now a thriver because of everything that I've experienced. So um, let's just jump into this. I know you've got questions. I know
Oh,
you know what your audience is looking for, and I hope to deliver.
no, absolutely. And again, thank you for, again, willing to share your story. I know I said it off camera, but I'll say it in front of the camera. Thank you for having willingness to come on here and share your story. So jumping right into it, um, you mentioned it, you said it, that you're a brother of sisters who were sexually abused, and then you yourself and your brother were sexually abused 6 years prior to that, are finding out that your sisters were being sexually abused. So if you could just kind of start from the beginning, you know how did you guys find out this way, found out your sisters were going through this, or I know you mentioned they told you, but like, what led up to this? What was going on in your life at the time? How old were you? Kind of just giving the background story to before that led to this major event in your life.
Sure. Back in 1977, my family, we were very popular singers in Los Angeles. I mean, we were everywhere. We were doing everything. 1977 became the year that a family of 10, four boys, four girls, of which I am number two. I have an
Wow.
older brother, and so I am number two. We were on the verge of signing the largest new artist contract that Motown Records offered anyone. Prior to us, they had lost to Jackson 5 3 years earlier, and they were searching for their next Jackson 5, and they landed on us. And coming from a life of poverty, homelessness, being on the streets, sometimes going, having days without eating, sometimes having to go into the neighborhoods to look for bottles that we could redeem for some cash and get a pound of ground beef and a pound of rice, and that would be dinner for 3 or 4 days. That would be what we had. We had finally reached in 1977. We were there. In fact, let me back up. In 1974, we were rehearsing at the house, and the phone rang. In fact, this is 1971, actually, and the phone rang. And my mother picks up the telephone and she says, "Hello? Who?" And she looks at the brother directly underneath me and says, "Phone is for you. It's Michael Jackson." We're like, "What?"
What?
We are in South Central LA. We are very poor. Michael Jackson's on the phone to talk to my brother. My brother gets on the phone. Okay, and everything stopped. The house was silent. At least for this moment, we had no rats scurrying through the house. We could not hear the roaches going up the wall on this day, because that was
Yeah.
very, very typical. He hangs up the phone and screams, "Michael Jackson said he's heard of us. He said he's
Wow.
heard of me. He said, I understand you sound just like me. You guys keep going. Do not stop. One day, you guys are going to make it." Jump cut 6 years later, we have been chosen to replace Michael Jackson in Jackson 5, because Michael Jackson had already left. He went over to Epic, and his brothers followed right after. We were it. They had created the pilot TV show for us. In fact, I have the script called At Wit's End. I have it in my office, and we were set. The bus was warmed up. It was outside the house. All we had to do was go outside, get on the bus, and we were gone. The life of poverty, hopelessness, helplessness was over.
Mhm. Yeah.
So my mother, one day, the week we were supposed to sign, my sister screams upstairs. She calls me and my brothers, "Boys, get down here, family meeting." So of course I'm thinking, this is it. We're about to find out the day we're getting ready to sign this week. Come downstairs to go into the living room. When I arrive, my four sisters are already there. The three youngest, who are the three youngest of all the eight, the last two are twins. They're sitting on the couch, but they are uncharacteristically quiet.
Mm.
I mean, these three never shut up. They were always talking. But I walk into the room, I'm like, Okay, what's going on? The other odd part, Q, is walking into the living room, there's an archway. It wasn't your typical square arch, rather square opening. It was an archway. And my oldest sister, the one directly underneath me, the third oldest, is pacing back and forth. And I'm thinking, okay, what's she upset about? But she could be upset about a lot of things. So I take my seat. Me and my brothers, we all sit down, and then my mother and my stepfather enter the room. My stepfather walks over to the brown recliner and immediately sits down and puts his hand over his head, over his face. I'm like, what's going on? My mother, who is very vivacious, she's very outgoing, she's very bubbly, uncharacteristically walks to the front of the room, but she is not smiling. She's stoic. She's giving off nothing. But my oldest sister is still pacing back and forth in front of the archway. My mother says the words that no brother could ever prepare for in his life. There's no way we could prepare for what we are about to hear. We were hit with multiple earthquakes in a 10-minute span. My mother turns around and she says, without giving us any emotion whatsoever, which is so unlike her, she says, your stepfather has been molesting your sisters for years. Now, keep in mind, my sisters, all four of them, they know what's coming. Because earlier during the day, there were many doors slamming back and forth downstairs. The sisters would go into a bathroom, they would go into a bedroom, and there would be some chatter. Like, what's going on? So they were preparing for what was about to happen. So they knew what was coming. We boys are hit with that news, and it's like, what just happened? What did she say? And then my mother says, I have known all along.
Wow.
Now imagine you're 16 and 17, like me and my older brother. Your stepfather, he's 6'6", 250 pounds. I'm about 5'8", 145 pounds at the time. And you are hit with this news. What the hell? You are spiraling down so fast. And then my oldest sister did something that was just another earthquake. She immediately spun around and pointed at us four boys and said, you can't talk about it. It didn't happen to you. It only happened to us girls. You can't talk about it ever. And like that, we four boys were locked out of the most important conversations in our life. The most important conversations with the people we needed to speak to the most just told us we cannot talk to them. What do you do? As I said, there are no books, there are no magazines, there are no trappings out there anyway that deal with the trauma of brothers. Once we learn about this, I have spoken to hundreds of men. This particular subject is not foreign. Men just don't talk about this aspect of it. And women who historically have carried such a heavy load with sexual abuse, I get what my sister did. I understand it. She had to protect herself. She had to protect her sisters. But at the same time, we brothers were innocent in all of this. In fact, wasn't long ago, one of my sisters, in fact, the very same sister told me that I don't understand why you boys are upset. How you got nothing happened to you, but Q, it did. Yeah. It happened to us. Once we were told, we were now victims. Maybe not in the same way they were, but we are victims, and we're were in this family together. Unbeknownst to my older sister, she had no idea that me and my older brother were sexually abused by our babysitter 6 years earlier, as I had mentioned. And so, what do? I have come to find out that so many men have this same story. They can't talk about it, and there's no place for us to go. And my whole thing is there has to be some tools created. There needs to be some systems in place for brothers. There needs to be some sort of outreach, something available to us. There are thousands upon thousands, as one of my sisters told me, of books and articles from women. But she said, I have heard absolutely and seen absolutely and read absolutely nothing for men. I had no idea you boys were carrying this. And it was so bad that this self-esteem and this manhood takes a very big hit. And there were some things that could have been done in the immediate aftermath, and then there's some things that could have been done subsequent to that that wasn't done. For instance, my mother did not put him out, did not do anything. And my mother had all 8 of us kids by the time she was 24.
Wow.
From age 16 to 24, she had 8 kids, including a miscarriage. So she's a baby too.
Yeah.
And the amount of trauma and stress that was quietly, I say quietly exhibited in our house through secrecy was devastating. I had gone almost 45 years without talking to one sister about this up until about 2013. Didn't talk to them. I was afraid. Me and my brothers were literally afraid to talk to them. And this is me at 60, 55 years old.
Yeah.
But still afraid to talk. And bridges need to be, crossed. Healing needs to happen. And there's only one way to do that. And that's through conversations with brothers and sisters. So my book, Helplessness, is very dark. It's very gritty. As I had mentioned to you before we got started, it's not the People magazine version.
Yeah.
It's not Life magazine. It's not Essence. It is not that. It is the ugly part. But that's book 1 of 3. So you go ahead, man. So
that's very powerful. All of and I know some of us, like even myself, right? I can sit here and I can tell you that, man, if I was in that room and I would have heard that, regardless of his size or, of my dad's size or whatever the case might be, I would have gotten up and I would have put him in his place and put my hands on him. Me and my brothers would have jumped in and we would have, handled business, right? I can sit here and I can tell you that, right? But the reality of the situation is, up until that moment, I imagine there was a sense of respect. I mean, for your, he was your stepfather, but he was still your father in a lot of ways, right? So I imagine there was a sense of respect of like, I'm learning from this man on how to be a man and what's expected as a man.
No, it wasn't that at all. It was the shock of the news.
Right. Well, right. I guess my point with that is, you hear that. Right. And initially everybody wants to, nowadays everybody's like, oh yeah, you got to put hands on these people and, let them know. Yeah. But then the reality of the situation is you're 16, 17 years old.
Yeah. The reality of the situation is, that is noise. Mm-hmm. That is nothing but outside noise, because unless you're in the middle of it, you could ask any woman who's attempted to tell anyone about her being sexually abused. They are frozen. Most of them. Where do you go? Because there is no support. And then when their friends start telling them, girl, I would have done this. Girl, I would have done that. Every woman that I know that has been sexually abused will say, no, you would not have. It's easy to make that proclamation when you are dealing with the emotional trauma. behind it, when you are dealing with the nightly visits from your father or your stepfather, as a woman who's doing it, it's easy for your friends to say, I would have, like you said, put hands on it. But no, when you are a child and you are looking for the people to protect you from this sort of thing, and they end up being the people who are committing the
Yeah.
crime. And then when you go to aunts and uncles and they tell you they're I got to step back. I don't want to get involved because they're still hoping that we make it. You
Yeah.
know, so it is one thing to hear someone tell a story and then be on the outside and tell someone what you would have done. It's one of those things, as my older brother said, to be a woman in this world, you, as a man, you have to assume every woman has somehow been approached, possibly sexually abused. You just need to assume that today. And what typically happens in my case, as with brothers, our sisters, we heard the whispers, how come you didn't protect me? How come you didn't save me? How come you didn't hear my whispers, see my tears? But that's when it's not presented to us. Why would we assume something like that is happening, especially when you're uh, 13, 14, 16, 17 years old, you know? And so the question becomes, for brothers, where do we go? As I said, there are no
Yeah.
support systems. There's not even a one-step program for us. So what do we
Mhm.
do?
And that kind of leads me, or makes me think of kind of my next question. So, you mentioned that your mom, even after this moment right here, she didn't kick him out. There was no. It was just. It seemed like there was just a conversation, and it was expected that you were just supposed to acknowledge that it happened and essentially forget about it and move on. Right. So, what's the immediate right after that? Right. So, like right before that, you said, "Hey, your brother just got done talking to Michael Jackson." Michael Jackson says, I heard of you. I'm familiar. Or not just before that, but years before that. But then fast forward to where you guys are now. You're supposed to be replacing what was the Jackson 5 over at Motown, right? And you're waiting to hear for this to sign this contract. So what happens next? Is that immediate next? Does a contract happen? Do you guys, is it like, hey,
No,
I can't do this? Or
no. The immediate impact is, if you look down on the living room floor, the emotions of an entire family are shattered. They're broken.
Mhm.
Relationships between brothers and sisters that were so incredibly tight that could never be broken are done. Are done. We used to have a saying when we were growing up, because we were rehearsing all the time when most of our friends were running in the streets, some were gaying and doing all that stuff, was no one can break us. Absolutely no one can break us except they can. And
yeah,
oftentimes the breakage takes place inside the home, not outside. It's very rare that the people that break a family are outside the family. It's the people inside the family that do the breaking and the destroying and all of the super duper trauma triggering things. So, in the immediate aftermath of what happened, my mother helps my stepdad leave the room. And like I said, we are total shock. We don't know what to do. There's nothing but silence. Um, with my sisters and my brother, we're just all looking at each other. And as I said earlier, my sisters already knew because they had experienced the actual abuse themselves. So they knew what was coming, but that doesn't make it any easier for them. And now their brothers are brought into this environment. So we're all trying to figure out what are we doing now. So we all went to our separate bedrooms, and it just felt walking into the bedroom that there was a shark just swirling around. There's this maelstrom in the middle of my room, and I'm going down. I'm about to be swallowed. And I sit on the bed. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? And how are my sisters coping with this? How are my younger brothers coping with this? What do we do? Oh, mom's going to take care of it because, yeah, she knew about it, but she's going to take care of it. She's going to make sure that we're taken care of. Q, that thought right there is one of the greatest regrets of my life because I waited a full 9 years before I did something. It was like a warm blanket. Mom is going to handle it. And yet we still tried to continue with our career because we desperately wanted to get out of this life of poverty. But there was no way of putting this thing back together, even though we tried. We continued to act as family. We would go to family functions and we would do family functions. And as I said, my mom, to be a little more accurate, she had put him out, but 2 weeks later, she let him back in the house.
Mm.
And that meant she put this wolf around her daughters, these 4 sheep, to do whatever he wants to do again. And so, as an older brother, you still you're constantly making this calculation. What do you do? Because he was the breadwinner of the family. As I said, we were incredibly poor. I went to 11 grade schools before I graduated high school. I lived in 21 different places. We were homeless on the streets 3 times, and you don't want to experience that whenever possible. And so it took me 9 years. And what got me to do something was in 1986, I was about to marry my wife, Patty. And 3 months prior to our wedding in November, this weight on me just could not be lifted. And the weight was, I have got to get this man out of the house. There is no way I can leave the house and he still be there. And it was just, I had started going into a very, very dark place. I mean, I was ready to commit the ultimate sin. And one Saturday night, I told my fiance, I said, look, because I had been living with her, I said, I got to go home for the weekend. And she asked me if everything was okay. I said, it will be. But I got to go. I got some things I have to take care of tonight. Otherwise, I may never do this. So it was a warm Saturday night. My bedroom at the house was still there, so I could always go there whenever necessary. And I went into the bedroom queue for 2 hours, and I just paced back and forth. Back and forth. It was, I opened the windows. It was a very nice night. I am drenched in sweat. I am nervous. I am scared because I'm waiting. There are 2 bedrooms upstairs. My mother and my stepfather's bedroom and mine. Everyone else's bedroom is downstairs. But I'm waiting to hear the sound of a door creak that tells me that a door is opening. So I'm just pacing back and forth, sitting on the bed, just questioning, do I have the wherewithal, the strength to do what needs to be done? He's so much bigger than me. He's so much stronger than me. He could crush me like this. Done. Not a problem for him. My bedroom was right off the landing of the stairs. Go to the top of the stairs, my door was right there. So as I'm in the bedroom thinking about this, I'm thinking, okay, the plan is when he comes out of the bedroom, I have to meet him, but I have to be past the landing when we meet. Otherwise, it's a push and I'm tumbling down the stairs. I cannot meet him there because tonight's the night it gets done. I have to meet him in the middle of the hall. Now, the middle of the hall, there's a short wall of about 3.5 feet that overlooks the rest of the staircase that spirals down. I cannot have my back to the wall, rather to that short wall. I have to be to the outside wall of the house. Because if I'm standing at the short wall, I am pushed and then I'm tumbling down, hit the ground, neck snapped, I'm dead. I can't do that. I have to be next to the outside wall that's overlooking the patio overhang. I hear the door open and I say, okay. I open my bedroom door and just take a quick glance. Yes, it's him. All 6'6", but he also wore this huge afro wig that put his height at close to 7 feet tall. Like, this is it. He starts walking out toward the hall to go downstairs, and I step out, and he sees me. And he stops, and he calls my name. I don't make a sound. I just look at him. He starts walking towards the stairs. I start walking towards him, and we come to the center of the hall. My face is in his chest, literally. That's how much bigger he is than I am. I can't even look over his shoulder. And I realize I am standing with my back to the short wall. The one place I cannot be. Mm-hmm. That's where I am. And I know one of two things is going to happen. I'm either going to die that night or I'm going to jail for premeditated murder. Either way, my life is over. But in my mind, my sisters are protected. Yeah, they might be protected from him, but I just caused even more trauma for them. I'm not even thinking like that. I'm thinking he needs to be put down tonight. I did not tell my fiance until the next day. So she had no idea that I might not come back. Dang. I didn't tell her, wasn't the next day. I didn't tell her for years what I did. And she was upset. You didn't tell me? Like, I wasn't thinking like that. I was in a very dark place. So I meet him at the top of the stairs and I look straight up this side of this mountain. I say, you have 24 hours to leave this house. If you are here by this time tomorrow, you will be dead because I will have killed you. Then I look at him and I turn around and walk away. Now, the instrument of his death was rested against my door jamb. It was my favorite baseball bat. I hit many home runs with that baseball bat, Fox Hills Park. Many home runs with that bat. It was my favorite bat. It's like that bat was meant for me, but I was prepared to hit the greatest home run of my life. I was taking his head off. Mm-hmm. I walk back into my room and I hear footsteps behind me. And I'm like, oh shit. And I go into the room and I close the door and I still hear footsteps, but they're fading. The footsteps are going the other way. They are going back to the bedroom where my mom is. Because earlier, when I was waiting for him, he was beating the crap out of my mom. I could hear her just calling his name. He was just slamming her against the bed, the wall. You could just hear it, boom, boom, crash, and just knocking down all of her perfumes and stuff off. You just hear it. And I'm like, how am I going to do this? But it's got to be done. I'm about to get married, and I have to get this done. I have waited too long. I have betrayed my sisters. I have failed my sisters. I need to reclaim who I am as a man. Otherwise, I will never recover from this. No one had stepped up for my sisters. And as I said, I waited 9 years waiting for my mom to do it, but she was too busy protecting her own ego. So he goes into the bedroom and he closes the door. And I'm like, okay. I wait about 15 minutes. I walk downstairs, hop in my little Fiat X19, and I go to my fiance's house. And she asked me, "Is everything okay?" And I didn't tell her what I had done. And I said, "I hope so. I'll know tomorrow." Tomorrow
Did she
rolls around.
know about your sisters?
I don't think so. She
No. Oh,
may
so
have.
you hadn't told her at that point?
I hadn't, but my sisters may have mentioned something. She may have gleaned something from those conversations.
Gotcha.
Something was definitely wrong.
Okay.
Uh, my wife, as I said, we come from different sides of the tracks. I'm black, she's white. I grew up going to a Baptist church, even though I'm more on the spiritual side of things. She's Jewish. Her family comes from upper middle class. As I said, I'm incredibly poor.
Yeah.
I am incredibly poor, but hey, she came to the club, saw us sing, and she loved the drummer. Here I am. Somebody finally liked the drummer. They always go for everyone out front, the guitar player, the lead singer. I always went for my three other brothers. My other one who's the Michael Jackson reincarnated kind of thing. But hey, here we are 38 years later. It's
Yeah.
spectacular with two kids. So I get up, I go to the house, and I have the bat with me. And I'm thinking, I have got to do something for my sister. This is for my sisters, period. I am willing to sacrifice my life. I'm ready to give it up right now. I'm done. I know I'm done. So I'm walking up the path to the front door and decide in that moment, I'm not bringing the bat in with me because I don't want to agitate the situation. So I rested against the outside door jamb of the front door, knowing and expecting when I opened the door, he's standing there with a gun pointing right in my face. Like, okay, at least he will go to jail for murder and my sisters will be okay.
Mm.
Just crazy thinking. But that's where brothers go ultimately.
Yeah.
I've spoken to many sisters about their brothers when they told them. Many have told me, well, not many, but 4 or 5 have told me their brothers have committed suicide. They killed themselves over not being able to protect their sisters, even though they didn't know, because the burden, the trauma is so heavy. It's such a PSD moment. There is no escaping. And like with most PTSD, rather, but most PTSD, it becomes part of your DNA. And like DNA, it becomes self-replicating. And this sort of trauma becomes self-replicating to the point that it could be incredibly dangerous for anybody. And mine had reached the point that it had self-replicated to the point that I was ready to commit murder. So I get to the house, I open the front door, expected him to be standing there, but he wasn't. I walk through the house, it is quiet. I hear sound coming from the back of the house. We had a makeshift studio in the back room, and my younger brother was back there. And I walked back there and said, "So is there anyone else here? You're the only one here." And he says, "I'm the only one here." I'm like, "So, where did he go?" He said, "He packed up and left this morning."
Wow.
I'm like, "Oh, he's gone." He's like, "He's gone." And we never saw him back in that house again. That was it. Now, my mother didn't talk to me for a couple of months. Because it became more about her needs over the needs of her children. She likes having a man around. So as far as I am concerned, she was willing to sacrifice us for her. But I needed to take care of my sisters. And as a brother, knowing that I was on the verge of committing murder, I think about it now, Q. I'm like, man, uh, that could have been even worse for my sisters because they would have carried this guilt that they led me to do that. But that's what women deal with. It's that juxtaposition of, do I tell them in the hopes that they protect me, knowing that if they protect me, they are going to suffer the consequences for it. And then what am I going to carry as a result of it?
I think it's so strong because as men, especially as young men, for me, especially growing up, one of the main things I thought about being a man was, or what it meant to be a man was, I had to be strong and I had to protect. And it didn't matter the consequences of what that protection cost me. It just mattered the most that I did it to show everyone around me and myself that I was strong and I was a protector and I'm a man. And so
Right.
I can only imagine, being you at that younger age, sitting there thinking to yourself, like, is, you know, is this what I'm supposed to do? Right. Because I need, like you said, you heard the whispers of them talking like, why weren't you there? Right. And so I can only imagine, it eats at you in your head to say, hey, I need to do something because I have to show them that I care. I don't want it to ever look like I didn't care, that I didn't want to do anything, And so I can only
Yeah.
imagine the decision making at that point was, it's either this or do nothing. And if I do nothing, am I a piece of shit for doing nothing? Am I
Right.
garbage for not doing nothing?
It ends up being worse because you have to live with it. At
Yeah.
least in my mind, if I had committed murder, then I'm going to be, at that time in California, the death sentence was still a viable option for law enforcement. I'm either going to be put down for premeditated murder, no doubt, because I'm a black man, that's going to be an easy call.
Mm-hmm.
But there was also the outside chance of life in prison. But when you talk about, as you said, how do you find your manhood in the midst of all of that, particularly if you are a black man, when so much of our strength is been socially predicated on our physical ability, not our emotional intelligence or our mental intelligence, which is as strong as any race on the planet, but we are always associated with our physical prowess.
Yeah.
And that, as great as it is, should not be the reason why we do anything. And yet, something has to be done.
Yeah.
My sisters are expecting me to do something. So for me, it was 9 years of betrayal. And um, you know, you don't know what to do. You don't know what to do. And as we said earlier, people are going to give you all kinds of advice.
Mm-hmm.
It's noise. It really is noise because your self-worth is wrapped up in it. Your who you want to be as a man is wrapped up in it. And the trajectory of our life is going to be determined by the help we do or don't get in this process. And if there's no help, there's no place for us to go, which is why it's so important that I create something, nonprofit or something that provides tools and conversation for brothers of all kinds, race, religion, political views, economic, education, because this is something that happens across the board, across the world. And yet here in the United States, no group comes closer to child sexual abuse than Black people. And people know it.
Yeah.
The predators know it. And they know that they oftentimes get a free pass. So something needs to be done. And it is my goal and part of writing the book Helplessness to that end. And so one of the great things about my book, I'll tell you really quick, not only did I write it, but 5 of my siblings participate.
Oh, wow.
Three of my
Okay.
sisters actually write in the book. They write sections in the book. Now, how unheard of is that? I'm going to have three sisters and two brothers contribute to the book. So you're going to get a full family view of what just happened and what it's like. And we hold no punches. We pull no punches.
Yeah.
Uh, it is an astonishing piece of work. I The goal of helplessness, which is book one of three, the other two are helplessness and happiness that I'm writing now, is to take you down really, really deep into a dark, gritty place. Because let's be very, very clear. In the United States, every day there are at least 165 children that are reported sexually abused. And these are children that have been reported. So last night around 1 o'clock, somebody walked into some little kid's bedroom. Tonight, around 1 o'clock, someone's going to walk into some little kid's bedroom. And tomorrow it will repeat itself. And my thing is, as tragic as my family story is, I cannot allow my family story to end in tragedy. I can use our story to help others. And in that way, that's how we give back. I used to think our mission here in this life together was music. Don't believe that at all anymore. I believe we were brought here to experience everything that we experienced so we could tell our story to help other children and families. And that's it. That's why I am here.
So you still have a relationship with your sisters now. I mean, now, right? After, obviously you said after years of not speaking to each other, but you have a relationship with your sisters now.
Oh, I have relationships with three of the four that are fantastic, but it took years. I remember in 2013 when I wanted to write this book, I had gone to a book writing seminar in San Diego being put on by the great motivational speaker, Lisa Nichols. And she was doing a weekend on how to write a book in 20 minutes.
Hmm.
So, okay, let me go. I want to write a book on a different topic altogether. At that time, I was very big in direct selling. And so I decided, okay, I want to write a book on how do you attract the youth and urban market. So I went there to do that. And finally, on the very last day, they got around to, out of all the things that they talked about and planned for the weekend, they finally got around to how to write a book in 20 minutes. I'm like, damn, I don't have much time here. I got to be getting back up to LA. And so the upshot is I got called on to talk about my book. And I said, well, this is my book. So I just went boom, 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 boom. And the entire room went quiet. And they said, what do you want to talk about? What is it that you're going to write about? I said, this is my family story. And they're like, oh, shoot. After 20 minutes of being up on stage talking about it and being asked questions, and like the room is full of tears, I sit down at my seat and I'm swarmed by, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 women. I have no idea. I was just swarmed. They're telling me I had no idea this is what my brother went through. So I immediately understood they were sexually abused in the house and they had no idea their brothers potentially went through the same thing me and my brothers went through. I was like, oh my goodness, it's too much. So I got up and walked out of the room and went out into the hall. I'm like trying to catch my breath. I'm hyperventilating, and the double doors burst open, and I'm surrounded by even more women saying, my brother did this. I should have understood. I didn't know what he was going through. They're crying. I'm crying. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is such a big deal. Like I had no idea until you talked about it. I didn't know my brother was in this kind of pain because he won't talk about it because we don't have room to talk about it. You know, at what point do brothers have the opportunity to talk about their trauma, about finding out what their sisters had gone through? Because we are too often viewed as, like, my sister's non-caring, We are just collateral, but it's okay. Collateral damage. You don't really matter all that much, but boy, oh boy. So in 2013, when I got to the Lisa Nichols thing, prior to going up there, I made one of the hardest phone calls in my life.
Mm.
I called one of my assistants and said, "Look, I need to talk to you about something that I want to do. I just want to make sure that you know what I'm thinking of doing." So I went over to her house and we stood outside her garage and I told her, and Q, I'm ready for the blowback of a lifetime. I'm ready to be kicked and screamed and booted off her property. And she said the one thing I did not expect. She said, "Of course you should tell your story. All you boys have a story. It's not my story. It's not us girls' story, but you need to tell your story because the world needs to know what brothers go through. You need to tell your story." And I was a mess. I just could not believe after all this time that she was willing to say, "You need to tell your story." And then I spoke to two other sisters, and surprisingly, they said the same thing. Even the one who said, "You can never talk about it." Like, wow. And so that told me that there is so much room for healing with brothers and sisters because all too often we are viewed as enemies on this.
Mm.
Well, we can be allies. We can help each other. We can support each other. We can be the missing link in terms of reconnecting the family that we otherwise do not experience or would not get. And so we have to have these conversations, but healing can only take place through the conversation. There is no other way.
Yeah. And so you mentioned what you were going through mentally for you and your brothers. At what point did you and your brothers connect to kind of talk about what you guys had heard, as you're being told this information? At what point did you guys, was it a few days afterwards, a couple weeks afterwards, or was it years later? At what point did you and your brothers really have a man-to-man, a heart-to-heart conversation and say, "Hey, this is how I felt when I heard this news. This is what I wanted to do. This is what I did do. This is whatever the case may be." Like, when did that conversation take place and what was it like?
You're assuming we had this conversation.
I am. I'm so sorry if I'm
No,
assuming too far.
no, no. I've only had a conversation with one brother about
Oh,
this because the other two, my two youngest, are still dealing with the trauma, still dealing with the fallout of it.
oh wow.
I spoke to my oldest brother about this 2 years ago.
Okay.
Finally, that is almost 50 years later. And understand, we see each other at picnics, we see each other at birthdays, we see each other at holidays, and yet, even as men, we did not want to talk about it. The only reason we talked about it is because I wanted to create a few years ago a podcast called For the Brothers and around this topic. Because as I said, I'm the only one out there talking about the experience that brothers go through. So I got me and my older brother together that we talked about it. And I had already gotten to a place that I could talk about it. In fact, one night, one of the things that got me there is one night a few years ago, my wife and I were in bed, and I was just thinking about all the stuff that had happened to me and my family. And I was telling her about it. I'm just thinking about this stuff. I'm just having a hard time going to sleep. And she says to me, she looks at me, she says, "You know you're a victim." And I said, "No, I'm not." She said, "Of course you're a victim." I'm like, "No, I'm just telling you what's going on." She said, "Look at you. You're a mess. You're sweating. You're shaking. Look at you. How can you not see you're a victim?" It wasn't until that moment that I realized I was a victim. Even though I
Mm.
had been sexually abused by my babysitter, even though I had, gone through the trauma of my sister, I had no idea that I was a victim until a few years ago. So how am I going to talk to my brothers about something that I know I'm not a victim of
Yeah.
or unwilling to recognize it? So
Yeah.
I talked to my brother about it, and that went really well. And then I decided, you know what I want to do? I want to get one of my sisters to talk to me and my brother about it for the first time. And we did a 2-hour conversation about this.
Wow.
And it was the first time that my brother and I spoke to one of our sisters about what happened.
Wow. What is
First time.
were they? I imagine, there were a lot of emotions in that conversation. So how do you start that type of conversation? How do you obviously invite them over, to have this serious conversation, but how do you start that with who talks first, right?
Well, because it was something that I wanted to do, and I wanted to create a podcast around it, which is on my website. There's 16 episodes to it.
Mm-hmm.
My goal was okay, and I told him, I said, so I want us to talk about this, but I want you to not hold back anything, and especially to my sister. I said, you do not hold back anything. You give us whatever you need to give us. You hit us with whatever it is you need to hit us with. We are here. I'm sure you've got a lot of questions, a lot of doubts, and said, this can only serve people if we are willing to ask the questions no one else wants to ask. We
Mm-hmm.
have to be willing to be vulnerable. We have to be willing to take it. We have to be willing to listen. And we have to be willing to engage. Otherwise, we fail the listener. We will fail the viewer. We will fail our mission with this. And so we went at it for 2 hours. It was 2 hours of heartache. It
Yeah.
was 2 hours of pain. It was 2 hours of trauma. It was 2 hours of love. It was 2 hours of healing. It was 2 hours of family coming back together. And it was in that conversation that my sister said, Keeper, I had no idea this is what you boys have been carrying all these years. We girls thought you guys just didn't care, but to know that you didn't say anything was because you were told you can't talk about it. I had no idea. I said, yes, you guys said we can't talk to you. So how are we supposed to approach you if you've already laid down the law?
Yeah.
And it was one of the most cathartic moments of my life. And then finally, with that, the outgrowth became being able to talk to my other sisters about it and being able to talk. You could just see us coming back together. And now we talk to each other all the time. We see each other all the time. We got this family thread on texting all the time. But I would
That's
tell you, if you had asked me 10 years ago if it was possible, I would have said no,
yeah.
not a possibility ever. But when you are talking about what do, the first steps for me to just understanding healing was I needed to find someone that I could talk to. Because all too often, men, we will hold that shit in.
Mm-hmm.
We aren't going to talk to anyone. We will start, and most men will understand is we will just start to just close down.
Yep.
I mean, we go in here. And once we go in here, we have a hard time coming out.
Yeah.
It'll take us days. You would like to say, well, I'm just processing. I'm just thinking about some things. I'm just trying to work my way through some things that our spouses would say, well, can you talk about it? No, I'm good. But no, we're not good. And that's because we haven't been given the tools or shown the ways to have these conversations, whereas women have been given a lot more support. And I say that to say they've been given a lot more support, unfortunately, because the only reason they had that support is because of the trauma that they've experienced that they never should have
Yeah.
experienced. So it's like, it's crazy to say once you know the reasons behind why you have to say it. It's just like, you've got to be kidding.
Yeah.
But they do have tools, and they have support systems, and they have books, and they have documentaries, and they're on Oprah and they're on Ellen, they're on this and they're on that. Guys, we have nothing, absolutely nothing. So my relationships with uh, some of my brothers and sisters are really good. One is I have an older brother up in Portland. We had to go through his stuff with this stuff that he knew and didn't tell us, and but you've got to find someone to talk to first. But before you can do that, you have to recognize that you have this trauma, because without acceptance, healing cannot begin to take place. You got to
Yeah.
accept it. You got to own it and not run from it, as hard and as difficult as it is. So once you do that, you talk to someone, and then it is freeing once you finally say it out loud publicly. Once I said it out loud publicly, what I had experienced as a little boy, and then what my family had experienced through the stories and my experiences in my book, shackles just began to fall away, because until you say something, the people that perpetrated the crime, they are in control still.
Yeah. Has your stepdad has he ever been, I mean, because you're obviously vocal about this and all this, so has any consequences came to him since you've been vocal with this, or even before that didn't require you to become vocal with this?
2019, 21, I don't remember the exact year. Oh yeah, he had to deal with me again.
Oh wow.
Turns out he lives about 15 minutes from me. And
Wow.
one day I'm on Facebook. That's a great question. That's a great question. I'm like, oh, hopefully he has something about this so he can see how this part resolved. I'm on Facebook and I decide, okay, I don't know why, but let me see if he has a Facebook page.
Mm-hmm.
Man, can you believe that fool had a Facebook page?
Listen, internet will make people do stupid things,
Yeah. And in this case, his stupidity was to my advantage.
Mm-hmm.
He not only had a Facebook page, but he remarried.
Oh my goodness.
And his wife passed away in November. I think we're talking 20. I'm sorry. I'm getting the dates wrong. It's either 2019 or 2021.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to give me some room on that.
You're good.
He announces that there's going to be a going home service in January, which means people are coming together to reminisce and tell stories about her life, and they had the funeral earlier in December. So I'm looking at this in early January, and I'm seeing this post. I'm like, oh no, he didn't. Oh, wait a minute. He just invited me to the party. because it's a public post to anyone. You want to come check it out? I'm like, oh. So they've had the funeral already, so I'm good there. I don't have to worry about that. But you make a public Facebook post and you invite the world to come tell their stories. Oh, you just invited me to the party. I am going. You're about to see me once again. So I called my older brother. I said, yo, look, he's going to be at this service in Van Nuys at this church. I'm going. It is time for him to deal with me one last time, because he did not get what he needed. And my older brother, I said, so you coming? He's like, yeah, I'm coming. Okay. So, all of this is in the book, all of it. I get to the church and it is packed with this woman's family and friends. And I'm looking, and there he is standing there. He's got this, he's got a walker and stuff. But as the service starts and they call him up, he leaves the walker behind, because now all of a sudden God is with him and he has the ability to just walk 50 yards by himself, unencumbered, with no assistance. I'm like, I've seen that show before.
Yeah.
I have seen that show, because when he did this and put his hand down at the end of my mother saying that she knew all about it, he faked a heart attack in front of all of us. But
Oh my
then,
goodness.
but then when it was time to get up, my mom helped him out. All of a sudden, he could stand and they just walked. Like, so he
Oh,
faked a heart attack. My mom said, I got to take him to the hospital. He's having a heart attack. So, okay, you guys had colluded. You guys already figured this plan out. So I've
yeah.
seen do this so many times. So, Q, what ends up happening is, well, I'll just give you the opening part. The pastor is walking around and it's full of black people. And the pastor is this really large white guy. And he's just seeing all these people in his church, all this color in his church that never shows up in his church. And me and my older brother, we're at the back of the room just sitting, and the preacher walks by and he stops at one person and says, Lord, this is such a beautiful day. Look at all the love that's in this room. He's looking down at this person and he says, what do you think about all that? And I just look up at him and I said, yeah, it's a beautiful day. Of all the people in the room that he could stop and say what a beautiful day is, Q, he stopped to talk to me.
Mm.
I'm
It's
like, this is
God's power right there.
exactly. This is providence. This is the way it's supposed to be. So the service goes on for about an hour and a half. When it's over, I get up out of my seat, get in the receiving line, patiently wait. He's sitting down, and I get to him and I look down at him and I call him by his name. And he looks up, hey, and he
Mm.
just starts shaking. The roles have been reversed. In 1977, it was me looking up at him.
Yeah.
Now it's him looking down at me. There is no place to go because I move in, and he is locked in that little metal chair. I brought 8x10s of each of my brothers and sisters and said, "Boom, this is her. You did this to her." Dropped it at his feet. Boom, you did this to this one. Boom, and that went on. I held that church for about 90 minutes. It was
Wow.
mine, and it was it was magical. In fact, at the end of it, I'm not even thinking about it, but I did from The Color Purple my Seeley moment where I just spun around and said, "Your life is over from this point on. You will never experience happiness ever again." And me and my older brother, we turned around and walked away. It was 90 minutes of glory. I called my sisters, each one individually. I told them when I did, they were in tears. They were like, someone did it. Someone stepped up and handled this for us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Because my goal was I needed to give them some degree of closure with this.
Yeah.
And this fool put on Facebook. And it's just so weird because I never go and look for him on Facebook, but I did that day. And there
Yeah.
it was. If I had gone 2 weeks later, I'd have missed it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the one of the more interesting aspects of the end of the story, there was another pastor, a woman pastor from Chatsworth, California. She was there, and she spoke on behalf of his ex-wife. And he's got grandkids all over. She's got grandkids all over the place. And I'm thinking, how many little girls in that family has he gotten to? How many little girls did he put on his lap?
Mm.
You know. So after it's over, I call the pastor at the church in Chatsworth, and I say, I need to speak to you about my ex stepfather. Do you know this woman told me that it's not her job to be concerned about the little girls in that family because they go to a different church?
Mm. Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
So she becomes part of his protective detail, like aunts and uncles who became part of his protective detail. And that's kind of what women experience all the time when they tell people, I've been sexually abused by this person or that person, and people look the other way. You have now become part of the group that's protecting the predators.
Yeah.
That's what you are now, and it's it's bad no matter who it is, but when it involves children, she said it's not her job to worry about those kids because they're not in her church.
As adults, our job is to protect kids.
Mm-hmm.
That is what we have to. I've said this so many times, and I get man, hearing this and all these things, it frustrates me because as an adult, if I know that there's an individual out there who's a predator who wants to pry on little kids, and I just sit there and say, well, those are not my kids, that's not my problem. Who the hell am I? Who the hell am I? I'm an adult. I'm a grown man. Like I why it's our job as adults to protect kids.
That is job one. That is job one. Protect the children.
So I think about it like I'm in the Army, and like I was talking about this before, and I couldn't imagine myself being in a place where I need to protect children and these other people. And my first thought is, well, I should protect myself. Absolutely not. We need to protect the kids. The kid, as cheesy as this line sounds, the kids are our future. So why wouldn't we not protect them? Why wouldn't we not want the best life for them moving forward? Why wouldn't we not make sure that anything that happened to us, any bad thing that happened to us, we never want it to happen to them? We never. When you see these, all I think about is my daughters, especially my youngest, but my daughter. I think of my daughter's faces, and I think about like if there was an individual out there who was ready to try to hurt my daughters or do any harm, I go to a very, very dark place, and similar to what you were talking about with your stepdad, what you were planning to do. I'm telling you right now, I tell people all this time. Going to prison is not a. If it was for my kids, I'd do it in a heartbeat. I'd be there
it's not
tomorrow.
An option. Not an option.
I'd be there tomorrow with a smile on my face, saying,
"Yeah,
I got mine." And so, like, for people to not want to protect kids is so frustrating because you have the power, you have the authority, especially when you were a kid and all you thought about was, where are the adults with all this power and authority that they claim to have over me as a kid? Where are they when I need them? And they don't show up. That's ridiculous. It frustrates me.
You have to have generational thinking with this. You have to look at every time you look the other way, you are now part of a group of people who are willing to say, I will look the other way, potentially even when it happens to my own children. Because this sort of thing, this attitude will travel down. And just imagine if me and my brothers had looked the other way, there was the potential for one of us to commit the same crime because we have just been shown as children, this is what's supposed to happen and this is the consequences behind it. You are rewarded with nothing happening to you. And so the only way that you break this cycle, and let's face it, breaking the cycle is not even the right definition. The only way you can arrest it, the only way that you can slow it down is people have to speak up. Yeah. You have to be willing to do things and participate. You cannot be a non-participant once you find out, because the fact is, once you find out you're a participant through action or non-action, there's no two ways about it. You are participating. You are participating through silence, condoning, and saying it's okay, or you are taking action to stop it. But you are a participant once you find out.
So all of this, right? You tell your story. And again, I appreciate you that you have a willingness to tell your story, to come here and tell us. Did that impact how the relationship that you have with your wife, and then also how you saw being a father? right? And I'm not saying, again, not saying that you did any of these things, but again, living with that, and only a few years ago, coming to the realization based off of what your wife said that you are in fact a victim. Did that impact what your role as a dad and what you saw as what a dad is supposed to do?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I can now take that experience and make one of two decisions. Either I was going to do the same thing or I was going to make sure it didn't happen in my family.
Yeah.
I can't say, well, I don't want to go there with it, but
Yeah. I
I
don't
may,
mean to.
I,
Yeah.
no. I was
Yeah.
going to say I don't want to say anything that may implicate someone else.
Got you.
But from it happens, and people make that decision to look the other way, even with it happens to their children. Not me.
Yeah.
I am so hyper focused on this that it made me more vigilant. It made me more aware of the possibilities. Uh, I one of the eight of us children, six of us, in fact, seven of us, were sexually abused.
Oh my
All four
goodness.
of my sisters, me and my older brother, and the older brother who Michael Jackson got on the phone with, he was being groomed by his high school math teacher who kept
Oh.
insisting that he come to his house for private lessons.
Oh my goodness.
So that's seven of eight of us. Seven of eight. So I see it. I recognize it. I know what the looks, the glances are. I know what the potential damage is. Because let's be very, very clear, when the news comes out, and it will, your family is going to go through stuff that you never imagined was possible.
Yeah.
And you've got to protect your children. My mother's greatest failing was not protecting us. There are so many things that she did that allowed to happen even afterward. One of my sisters, we were, and as I said, Q, this is after we were singing at the Playboy Club in Century City. We were there a lot. They loved having us there. But there was this one rich Arab guy who fell in love with one of my twins, one of the two youngest. In fact, the youngest. So she's the youngest of all eight of us. And at the time, the car we had was barely getting by. This guy wanted time with my sister.
Mm-mm.
So, in order to get time with my sister, he turns out, we find out later, as kids did, that he got us a new van. So my sister was traded for a new van. In other words, it's sex trafficking by my mother and my stepfather. And our experience, there are so many different things that happen. And as you say, if you know just the sexual abuse, that's one aspect. But then what oftentimes happens with people who get away with it is they figure, oh, I could take this to the next level.
Yeah.
Because the person who's supposed to stop me, their mother, she's in on it. Which is not surprising to me when I look back on it, because when me and my older brother, we were abused by our babysitter, I told my mother about it when I was 7 years old. And her response to me, standing in the kitchen at Slauson and Crenshaw, was, oh, baby, there's nothing I can do about it right now. In that room was my stepdad. So I'm thinking today that he saw that and said, huh, okay, she's not going to say anything. She's not going to do anything. Which meant he had a free lane to my four sisters. And he saw it happen. And he figured, I'm going to get away with it because she's not going to do anything. And this all comes out. It's all of the stuff is in my book, as dark as it is, but I just believe you've got to give people the real story. You can't, as I said earlier, this is not People Magazine. This is not,
Yeah.
no. This book is dark. It is gritty. It is ugly. And it is meant to make you feel pain, because my position on it is, as bad as you may feel reading it, it is nothing compared to the people who experienced it. Nothing. And if you really want to know what it's like, yeah, some people tell me, you don't give us room to breathe in this book. I'm like, no, I'm not meant to give you, not trying to give you room to breathe. My sisters didn't get any room to breathe. It's your position to read it and to understand it and absorb it so that you can make sure it does not happen in your family.
100%.
Or if you know that it is happening in your family, this is your chance to do something about it.
Do you think, and I don't, maybe for a fact that your mom went through something traumatic as well when she was growing up, and this is
Absolutely.
and again, it's not to justify her actions as right, but those traumatic events that she never had, she was never able to have that outlet or to be able to talk to someone and heal herself, impacted how her thought process and how she thought about how these things between right and wrong in these matters.
Of course,
Does
yeah.
that question make sense?
Yeah. I know exactly where you're going
Okay.
with this. And the answer is yes. My grandfather could be a very hard man. He was a loving man, but he could be very difficult. So she grew up in a generation where what happens in the house stays in the house, period. And
Mm.
so once again, we go back to when she had my older brother at 16. And she's married to my dad, who I saw beat her many times. He was a drug addict. He was an alcoholic. He died of a combination of the two. And so he was a
Wow.
womanizer. He viewed himself and wanted to be like a pimp. But that's how she grew up. And she grew up in the era of, you marry someone, you do not divorce them no matter what, especially if you're a good Christian. You do not do that. That's how her family grew up. So she's got these 8 kids. And so there's trauma all around her. My grandmother, is spectacular as she is, and who, by the way, knew what happened to us, her grandkids, and did nothing about it. Both did, and chose to do
Wow.
nothing about it. They both knew because I talked to them about it and asked when did they know, and got all the information, got all the story. So my grandmother, my mother's mother, was just part of that generation where you just took it. You just took it. Your job was to cook and clean, and that's what she did. And if your husband was doing stuff, oh well. So my mother, like I said, my grandfather was not abusive sexually, but he could be emotionally and mentally challenging because he was he could be a very hard guy. And yet he could be so much fun when he wanted to be.
Yeah.
So she carried a lot of different trauma with her. And pretty much was determined by the example that her mother, my grandmother, set. This is what you do. You just live with it.
Yeah.
And we're in a generation now, luckily, that women are more powerful and more empowered and more secure in who they are, and are willing and ready to fight back. Because that's how you do it. And hopefully, women who have gone through some very similar things know that there are men who are out there who are willing to be their allies and advocate for them in very much the same way the children need men and women and people to be their allies and advocate for them when they stand up and say, I've been sexually abused.
I 100% agree. Do you have any advice, any piece of wisdom that you can give, um, any, especially people who are still silent, who don't say anything, who are living with this, especially, for in case you talk about, being a brother on the side of the thing, but also being a person who was sexually abused yourself. Do you have any advice to that person who's about to be a dad, but very nervous about, all this trauma in their life, or what
Mhm.
they should do, how they should what's the right steps into healing, so they don't pass this on to their kids? Because I know this is our biggest fear as parents, is passing the bad parts of us, the parts we don't want anyone to see, to our kids, right? Do you have any advice, any wisdom that you would offer, especially to that new dad who's in
Yeah.
that place right now?
Yeah, it seems that you've got a couple of questions going there. So if I can just dissect it and take them
Yes,
a
please, by
little
all
bit at
means.
when it comes to the new dad, in fact, I'm about to become a grandfather for the first time in about 4 weeks. My son and his wife are about to have their first.
Oh, awesome.
And
Congratulations.
thank you. Overly just too excited about it. A chance to shape the next generation. Yes. Uh, but I will say this during the podcast with my brother and my sister, and I actually did an interview with my son. He conducted the interviews.
Wow.
So he got a chance to hear from his uncle and his aunt and me and just go back and forth. And one of the things that he said that I found uh, during the interview with he said, one of the things that I want to do is I hope I can rise to the level of being a father and a brother like you were. And I'm hearing this, I'm like, I failed so badly. I was so off point. I was so not where I should have been. It's like, but you ultimately were the one who handled it.
Mm-hmm.
You were the one who were just willing to give your life. And so he said, and this was about 5 years ago, and he said, when I become a dad, the thing that I want to do is to have that strength of character like you. And I'm like, but my character is not. And he's like, well, stop, Dad. It is. It is. You did what no one else would do. So he said, I have learned by watching you and my uncle and my aunts what to pay attention to when it is someone's around my children. Now, he's about to have a son.
Yeah.
So it's a slightly different because predators tend to go towards girls,
Yeah.
but he recognizes what is out there. And the main thing, Q, is keep your eyes open. Don't assume everything's okay, no
Yeah.
matter who you're with. We've all heard the stories of what has happened in multiple religions and churches with people in charge. We've heard about politicians. We've heard about teachers. We've heard about law enforcement. We've heard about people who are empowered to take care of our children and assume that they're doing the right thing. No, don't assume that. Pay attention. If your children say something to you, I say believe them first, confirm second.
Yeah.
Don't confirm and then say, I'm going to believe you, because you're not going to do the confirmation first.
Yeah.
Believe them first, and then take the steps to confirm what they said to be true. And then don't necessarily believe the person who's saying, I didn't do it. Don't necessarily take that at face value.
You
Still back up and say, you keep your eyes open.
because I think that's so powerful, because one, I want to mention what your son said to you is, it's amazing how our kids can say something to us, and we as parents can sit there and think like, I failed in this aspect, I failed in this, and I failed in this. I'm not the example that you think I am, but our kids will turn around and say, no, Dad, you're great. You're doing a great job. And it just gives me this warm feeling. I for a second there, because my daughter has done it to me before, where I get prideful. I'm like, yeah, I am a great dad. But then I'm like, no, I can't get too prideful, because then, what if I start failing at this again? Almost
Yeah.
reminding myself, like, oh, I'm, I may be good enough in that aspect, but I'm still not good enough yet to be her dad. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's
Yeah.
amazing how kids are able to bring that and say, like, no, you're doing it. We're doing all these things for them. And then for them to say, like, hey, like, you're doing a great job. Like, you've been
Yeah.
doing a great job. You're killing it. It's a warming feeling that I hope any and every parents get to experience.
I agree. I think it's important that we recognize as parents and just people in general, every day there's always someone watching.
Yes.
Whether you know it or not, you are influencing someone. Someone is paying attention to you, be them 5 years old or 95 years old. They are watching what you are doing, how you are reacting, how you are resolving and solving problems. And that, especially if they're 5 years old or 6 years old, you are telling them through your actions what's right or wrong, not through what's coming out of your mouth. So you might be just walking down the street, and some little kid across the street is watching you interact with someone else. You are influencing them. There's always, always, always someone watching. And it could be in your job. You might think they're not paying attention. There's always someone watching what you're doing.
Yeah.
So you are controlling your outcomes and oftentimes the outcomes for other people. As it relates to, I just want to get back to your, like I said, I want to dissect your couple of questions there.
Mm-hmm.
From a healing standpoint, as we had mentioned earlier, I look at it as a 3-step process where you begin. First of all, you have to recognize and accept the fact that you have been traumatized, that you are a victim.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be okay with that reality, because if you're not, you are, one, protecting the person who committed the crime against you, but you are protecting, you're not serving your higher self. And your higher self always demands that it be taken care of, that it be loved, that it be shown healing, that it be shown grace. Otherwise, you're not living up to your greatest potential. So you've got to accept that you have been abused. And for men and Black men, goodness, it can be very, very hard to accept that vulnerability and then to show the vulnerability to other people, those people who love you and can protect you and help you through the process. After that acceptance, you must find at least one person to talk to, which was so hard, which is why I didn't even talk to my brothers about it for 50 years.
Yeah.
And we had gone through it together, but we were afraid to talk to each other. In fact, my older brother today says, I won't let anyone in anymore.
Wow.
I will not open myself completely to anybody anymore. And I said, you realize when you do that, you are empowering the very person who did that to you.
Yeah.
And he says, yeah. I said, your only way through is to go through, period. It's going to be painful. So you got to find at least one person. After that, cling to those memories and those people who uplift you. You know, you've got memories, you've got people, places, and things. Get back there instead of, oftentimes we can go into the cesspool of doubt and fear.
Yeah.
And it can be difficult to climb out of. You're in this void. In this void, there are no walls, so nothing to cling to. You're just kind of floating emotionally. Your only way out, I'll say it again, your only way through is to go through. That's the only way that you get there. And then after that, if you can talk publicly about it, and publicly might be just sharing with your family, just sharing with your spouse, just sharing with your kids, the shackles of that, oh my goodness, when I started talking about it, when I just started accepting and stepping into my space and just said, yeah, that's me, that's my life, everything changed.
Wow.
All of it changed. That person and my mother no longer had power, no longer had control. And at that point, that's what allowed me to make my U-turn and go back and deal with them.
Yeah. Dang. So listen, we've been talking now for, over an hour and a half, and I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I don't want to downplay your story by any means, or your experiences and what you've told us so far. But so before we end, I just want to say again, thank you, because telling your story, being a voice for your sisters as well, in your own way, is powerful, impactful. And I know there are people out there who are going to listen to this, and they're going to be like, and going to say to themselves, I need to say something. I thought I couldn't say something before, but you've given me the power, the strength, the inspiration, the motivation to go say something, because I'm scared. It's almost like your part of your mind is still that small child that was traumatized when, that trauma still lives with you. And so that part of your mind is still that small child. It hasn't developed like the rest of you has. Right. So, it's powerful what you talked about. It's powerful the things you said. Again, I thank you for using my platform and to come on here and tell your story, because that means so much to me and in my audience, right? To have you on here and to talk and tell your story and your experiences. But before we go, I just want to say, is there any last thing you want to end with, or any piece of information before we go that you want to tell anybody, or tell my audience, or tell anybody something special or specific?
I think we've gone through a lot of it.
Yeah.
You've graced me with the opportunity to be with you for about an hour and a half. And it is, quite frankly, one of the most enjoyable times that I've had talking to someone about it. I know that may sound weird on this topic, but
Yeah.
to understand that what I've gone through, I try to find joy somewhere in the middle of all of it, even if this is this type of conversation. So this has been quite an honor to be able to participate. Uh,
Yeah.
the the one bit of advice that I would possibly close with is trust your instincts. They rarely fail you.
Yeah.
If something feels wrong, it's probably wrong. If something feels out of place, in all likelihood, it is out of place. And it might not feel and look out of place for anyone but you.
Yeah.
But you is all you needed to be out of place for.
Yeah.
And when you have that feeling, trust your instincts, look into it, do your due diligence, especially when it comes to your children. For sisters and brothers, become allies. Do not become enemies. Sisters, allow your brothers the room to talk. We are carrying so much trauma because we aren't asked if we can talk. We are collateral damage. And as I said, we have nowhere to go. There's no one for us to talk to. We are our feelings aren't disposable. They're not something that you can just discard and just shunt it to the side as well. That's just them. They'll deal with it. No, we can't. We don't know what to do. Uh, Unfortunately, your experience and on what to do and how to go about it, unfortunately, is better. And we need your help. We desperately need your help. Um, and if I could just throw this in there, my book is on Amazon, Helplessness. Uh, Take a look at it. It's not going to be easy read, uh,
Mm-hmm.
but there's so much more in that than we possibly could have talked about in this conversation. And what are the beauties that come out of that book is, as I said, three of my sisters contribute. I remember asking them if they would contribute. I knew they were going to say, "Are you crazy?"
Yeah.
But they said yes. And then two brothers like, wow, we're going to give people a really great view of what this is like. It's a great read for schools, religious community, clinical people, law enforcement. This is what it's like inside a house that's been
Yeah.
dealing with this, only colored by our music career.
Yeah.
Can you imagine us being the topic of VH1 behind the scenes?
Oh man.
Yeah,
God.
the Great Whitney family, and here's what really happened. Oh,
Good Lord. Seen so many of those nowadays. But hey, Keeper, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate your time. And to my audience, listen, this topic is very serious, and everything his book and all his links, they're going to be in the description below, his website, everything. So you can, if you want to know more about Keeper, you want to find out, hear those episodes that he did with his family, his sisters and his brothers, and hear more about that story. Like
yeah.
that's all going to be available in the description below. His book's going to be in the description below.
And he's a speaker. He speaks all the time. He's actually working on this TED Talk right now. So cool.
Yeah, speaker, which we're going to talk about afterwards, because I definitely want to talk to you about TED Talk. But anyway, guys, hey, look, that's going to be it with this episode. I know it's long, and if you've made it to this point, I'm appreciative. Keeper speak appreciative of it. And I will end it with this: being mediocre is a choice. Refuse to be mediocre. And Mediocre Dads out.